Hey, what's poppin' guys, Sizzyl here, and today we're taking a look at The King's Bird. This is a game I found purely because Steam said it would play well on deck, which it did. There was no technical issues playing this on my Steam Deck. That was until it had issues. Randomly one time when I booted the game, it swapped the keyboard controls. I couldn't seem to swap it back, even with the keyboard, so I reinstalled the game, which ended up deleting all my save data. In other words, these technical issues for a great on deck pre-platformer ended up limiting my playtime to around 2.5 hours, which didn't change anything I'm about to say in this review, I just thought it was worth mentioning. This game is some kind of anomaly as far as I'm concerned. It shows that just because you have all the technical knowledge needed to make a phenomenal game, that the end product isn't always guaranteed to be great. This game starts off super promising. It has a pretty intriguing first cutscene, some pretty great visuals, and then you're just spawned into the world with no directions. You can see the many different types of inputs on the walls, and move in any direction you can think of, which helps you get the idea behind the controls in a very natural way. I can't remember any other 2D game I've played feeling as open world as the starting area in this game. Eventually though, you make it out of the starting area and into the real game, which was a lot less exciting and free. The game pretty randomly transitions from teaching you all the basic controls to just throwing you into different hub worlds. That being said, the hub worlds were still pretty cool. You generally had to maneuver your way around them in order to even access the level warp portals, which I personally found pretty enjoyable. After playing a handful of levels though, I started to realize that this game has no story, or at least not one that you can easily follow along with. There was very little story given after leaving the starting area, except every 12 to 16 levels where you'd get a 5 to 10 second cutscene with no words. That was honestly just confusing most of the time. Which I found very disappointing is the initial cutscene in this game really pulled me in and got me pretty excited to see where the story went. It's normally not an issue for me if a game chooses to have little to no story, but I feel like this game set the expectation of a story that ended up pretty much not existing in my eyes. Either way, after a relaxing time just floating all over the starting area, looking at the beautiful scenery, and listening to the opera-style music, which only has a singer present when you're gliding, was a level that expected you to be pretty competent with the controls. Which, let me tell you, I was not very confident with after only 3 minutes of gameplay. Now this game has a cheat mode like Celeste, so you could essentially just skip this level, but at that point you really aren't playing the game, so I never really turned it on except to just see what it was. But even assuming that you don't care about things like that, every level in this game assumes that you have the skills to beat the previous levels, so you're just making things much harder on yourself if you do use cheat mode. After that initial spike in difficulty, the levels actually progress pretty good, generally introducing a new mechanic or two, or combining previous mechanics while still having great scenery in the background and a pretty consistent and normal progression across the board. The weird part was that even though I was constantly doing new things in these levels, I found the movement feeling pretty stale and at times confusing, generally when gliding into objects because it seems really inconsistent, at least to me. To recap basically everything I've said so far, this game has some pretty solid movement, some very beautiful visuals, solid level design, decent level progression after a weird initial spike in difficulty, and some pretty good game design with cool mechanics like only having vocals in the background music when you're gliding, which I really like as a mechanic, but there's pretty much no story in this game to speak of. I really can't pinpoint what I didn't like about this game. It really just wasn't engaging. It had everything I should like in the game, and the only real flaw was the no story and mediocre music, but those are generally not an issue for me. It even had leaderboards for all the levels, which should have appealed to me in some way as a speedrunner. Somehow though, after playing the first hour of this game, I just started getting pretty bored and wanted to go play any other game instead. The weird part to me is, like I was saying, it didn't feel like the game was doing anything wrong. There definitely is something wrong though, because apparently this game used to be $20 but went free to play after many other people echoed the same type of sentiment. I feel bad for these game developers because it's clear that a lot of time, care, and passion went into this project, but somehow despite all of their hard effort, I had a really hard time playing this game outside of the absolutely perfect intro sequence. Overall, while I wasn't able to clearly articulate what I liked and didn't like about this game because I honestly don't know myself, I still feel inclined to give this free platformer a 1 out of 5.